Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm Tim Dennis. Got a good show for you this evening, afternoon, morning, whenever you're listening. I keep getting used to that radio thing, so I keep thinking evening, but you know, it's been plenty of years since we've been on air. Speaking of, I want to thank everybody for the nice communiques, the emails, the messages on social media as we get them in, and just your thoughts and the suggestions that you're sending in for guests, the stories that you're sending in for Supernatural News and for True Crime Tuesday for Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminals. Keep them coming, folks. I'm grateful for the stories that you're sending. But you know what I really want? I really want your experiences, your supernatural experiences for our segments for ParaShare on Wednesdays. 651-300-4977. You can call that number and share it there, and then Bruiser and I, or Mally and I, or Jessica and I will weigh in on them on Wednesdays. So you can call that, and we'll actually play your experience on the air, and then we'll weigh in on it. Or just send me an email, tim@darknessradio.com. We'll share your experience there as well. Or just email me, tim@darknessradio.com. Send me an email and let me know about your experience that you had with either the other side or with a cryptid or even a UFO. I'd like to hear about that as well. Speaking of experiences, boy, have we got an experience to talk to you about as well today. Our guest is the Reverend Peter Panagore. And, man, let me tell you about the Reverend here. He was recruited to TV as the fifth minister of America's oldest religious broadcast. Peter's 2-minute spot aired for 15 years, just before the morning weather on News Center Maine on 2 NBC stations, reaching 80,000 viewers a day. Previously, Peter served in New England as a United Church of Christ minister. His Audible bestseller, Heaven is Beautiful, has been optioned for a film. His first book, 2 Minutes for God, is a non-denominational devotional drawn from his 1,700 TV stories. He is working on his third book built around his talk and provides mentoring to spiritual seekers worldwide. Well, you may say, Tim, why is he here? Well, Peter also went ice climbing with his partner on the world-famous Lower Weeping Wall along the Icefields Parkway in Alberta, Canada. On their descent, they became trapped on the side of a mountain, and as the sun set, he was overcome by exhaustion and hypothermia. He died on the side of that mountain, and in those minutes on the other side, he experienced hell, forgiveness, and unconditional love. And he says heaven was beautiful. And then, believe it or not, he had a near-death experience, and he's had a second one since then. And we're going to talk to the Reverend just about all of that and much, much more on this program today. And I've got goosebumps just thinking about it. Let's welcome to Darkness Radio, the Reverend Peter Panagore. Welcome, Peter. How are you?
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much. That was a grand introduction. And do please call me Peter. And just to start, may I start and quickly say that all the time I was an active minister, I kept telling people just to call me Peter, and yet it was hard. It's a hard break. I never wanted to be called Reverend simply because it set me apart from the people.
Okay.
One of the things that happened to me when I died was a sort of a radical transformation of equality. Okay. And so I know that it's on the paper.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Totally on the paper.
You know, but Peter, let me, and I will call you Peter throughout the interview.
Yeah,
we'll drop that title. But I also, I guess in my upbringing, I was also told to respect the title that was earned.
Thank you very much. True. That's okay. That's right.
We call doctors because they've not only have they done the work and practiced their craft, they've also earned that title.
Wow.
Thank
you.
And someone who practices the faith and have counseled those people and have been there in times of need and struggle have also earned that title.
Oh my, totally true. Thank you. Yeah. My gosh, I'm still learning things.
Oh, and we all are. I mean, if we're not learning, we're dying. Correct?
Yeah, and it's not so bad. Let me tell you. Though the dying's not so good, but the death, baby, death is beauty.
Well, I think that's the first time I've ever heard somebody say that, Peter. I think I can speak for a lot of us where we think we hear the word dying and death and we cringe. It's cringeworthy because we're all fighting to avoid that day. I think we're fighting to enjoy life, and we're fighting to avoid the day where death is here.
Well, dying sucks. It's either a shock or some kind of drawn out thing, and it's never very pleasant. But the death part is not what you think it is at all. It wasn't what I thought it was. And it left me so radically changed that I lost all of my faith. So here's the root of this reverend thing.
Okay.
Is that I lost all of my belief systems when I came back. No more belief, no more Bible. I went to divinity school. I studied the Bible. No more Bible belief, no more religious belief, no more nothing belief, no more faith, just knowledge of love. It's this entirely radically different thing. And what it left me with is knowing where I'm from and knowing where I'm going. And the same about you too. I know where you're from and I know where you're going. And you're going to love it.
Now, those are some big thoughts. And I know there are some people in our audience who are very, very attached to their faith and very, very attached to the word. They're very, very attached to their Bibles. They're very, very attached to the word in those Bibles.
Mm-hmm. I hear that. I understand it. There's light in the Bible. Mm-hmm. Jesus brought light into the world. Jesus brought love into the world. He transformed the history of our planet and humanity. The radical change that happened to me is that I didn't even have a body when I was dead. I was consciousness separated from self. I was infilled with the unity of light. I was completely transformed. And I'm not alone in that. There's a long history in Christianity of mystical experiencers like Julian of Norwich, who may have had a near-death experience, or Meister Eckhart, or St. Paul. You can think of St. Paul riding on the donkey on the side of the road and gets a blast of light. Either he had a near-death experience, because it sure sounds like one to me, or he had a high-level mystical experience, and he came back a transformed man. And one of the things that he said was, "Now we see in a mirror dimly, then we'll see face to face." That is exactly what happened to me. I support people's faith. I was a minister for 18 years. This radio parish thing I did on television and radio was a ministry of hope and inspiration. Its aim was to upbuild people's faith. But the truth of it for me is that, and for lots of near-death experiencers like me, I can speak for this. I can speak to this in a large generalized way, that once you've been in the presence of the divine, nothing else compares. No book, no story, no idea. The power of the presence of the light itself is so transformative that it's made me live an extraordinary life of radical, selfless help in desperate situations in ministry. I had a vehicle as a minister to do exactly what you said, attend to the dying and the grieving, but also there were embezzlers and murderers and arsons and decapitations and gunshots and all sorts of other stuff too, domestic violence. And when you know who you are, and you know where you're from, and you know that death will not touch you, it gives a radical form of, trust and courage in the face of frightening circumstances. And on top of that radical change, that night that I died, it was 12 hours of trauma, of fighting for survival. And freezing to death in the dark in Canada on a cliff in the middle of nowhere alone. And so it was, I dug a depth of will inside of me that night. The drive to survive was this act of will. And the act of will that only stepping forward mattered has carried into my life. And so the two things in combination have left me sort of, let's just say I was the most unusual minister anyone had ever met.
That's a good way of putting it. And we'll get to that here in a bit. I want to rewind a little bit here, Peter, and I want to talk a little bit about, because this has always perplexed me a little bit. So I do want to go right to the source, and I want to ask this question of you. I have, when I was younger, I was an altar boy. I was an altar boy for 3 years in the Catholic Church. The reason I left was because I had told Father that I didn't believe that God was there in the church. I believed that God was everywhere, but I didn't believe he was there in that building. The reason being was because I felt like people were coming to that building to be forgiven for their sins, only to leave and then come back again the next week, and leaving knowing that they were going to commit those sins yet again. And it was just a cycle. It was the cycle of them knowing that they were going to get away with it, come back, get forgiven, go away, come back, and do it all over again. That the people who were showing up each week were the guilty, not the innocent, but the guilty. That the true Christians that were living the life that they were supposed to live of Jesus, or living that lifestyle, were practicing it and really weren't the people who needed to be there. Father respectfully disagreed with me and understood what I thought, but he said I was, very misguided at that point, but understood where I was coming from and wished that I wouldn't leave at that point, that he felt I needed more education, but understood why he felt I needed to step away for the time being. There was more to the conversation. One of the questions I had for him, which he answered for me, and I'm going to ask this of you, because I'm curious as to what your feeling was before, because you mentioned something when it came to television and delivering your ministries, and how it changed after you had your experiences, is this. As you're delivering your ministries, I know that you're reading from the Bible, that you're, as you put it, you're delivering these messages from the Bible. How did it change? How did the feeling change? Because when Father Tim Nolan told me, I feel Spirit moving through me as I deliver these messages from the Bible, you actually met with Spirit after you had these experiences. As you delivered these messages from the Bible, as you're on television delivering these messages, how did the feeling change? Did you feel Spirit moving through you as you were delivering these messages? And how did the feeling change from the time that you delivered these messages to the time that you had your near-death experience?
Well, I delivered those messages after my NDE. So we have to go back before that in order for me to explain this. So I went to Catholic high school, and every year we read a gospel. So by the time that I died 3 years later, I was familiar with Jesus, and I was part of the Teens Encounter Christ movement. So I was a charismatic Christian. But when I died and came back, when I picked up the Bible the next time, it was an entirely different book. Suddenly, when I read the words of Jesus, when he says, I am the way, I hear the cosmic Christ speaking of light beyond imagination, the universal presence of love that imbues all things. And so the book, although it's the same, became an entirely different structure for me. So I then my life changed as a result of dying. I was going to be an architect and was going to graduate school in architecture, family business. Didn't do that, went to divinity school, studied mysticism, studied contemplation, studied Western mysticism in particular, and Western contemplation, practices of prayer. Mm-hmm. And so as soon as I climbed in the pulpit, I was already in this state of being, and through an interior practice of prayer, continued to carve space inside myself for thy will to be done, not my will. And to make a pool inside, a room for a pool inside myself. And and increasingly so over the years, whenever I spoke, I would be, as the Christian ministers would say, in the spirit. It would flow through me. It still flows through me. It actually never stops flowing into me. This is one of the results of being a near-death experiencer, is that it's not something that happened just way back 40 years ago, and again, more recently. It's a constant presence. So it's not an active act of intellect that I choose to believe in something. It's an act of will to die before I die, so that when I die, I don't die. So it's a practice of selflessness in prayer, and that opens this channel. And so the entire mission of my life is the communication of the Spirit directly, without me as a filter, without my thoughts or my words or my ideas, but just to try to become an empty channel for the light itself. So that then the light, if it can come through me and if people can feel it through me, if the Spirit moves through me, then they can find it inside themselves. And once they see this inside themselves, they know that this is what they are. Once they know that once they taste this, they sip from the crystal river. Once they taste this, they now know who they are. And when you know who you are, then you can reorient your entire life to aim for the pearl of great price. And you get the pearl of great price, and you let go of everything in your life. Only what you let go of aren't the things in your life. I mean, I got plenty of things. All around me. Mm-hmm. You let go of yourself. And when you let go of yourself, then the Spirit moves on its own. And so the craziest thing that I discovered, I mean, when I was in the pulpit, there's this one woman in my congregation, in my last congregation. She came up to me one Sunday after church. She said, "Oh my God, Peter, oh my God, the entire time you were speaking, you had this huge flame around you." And she had always a sparkle about her. She could see the light itself. Because she was the light itself. So when Jesus says, "Let those who have eyes see and those who have ears hear," he's talking about a real thing. He's not talking about his words. He's talking about seeing the light and hearing the light inside the words he spoke. It's experiential. So then when I got into television, I realized it goes through the lens. And not only that, it was all pre-recorded. So I go in the studio on a Friday and I'd pre-record these stories, and I would meditate as I wrote. I would meditate as I before I went on air, and then I would focus. I would like bring up my chi or bring up the Spirit and try to project it through my voice and my eyes, and it by getting out of the way.
Okay.
And it speaks for itself. So the answer to your question is yes, and with a single word, yes. But it's not just the Bible. It's experiential when you're out in nature and the Spirit leaks through the beauty all around you, or you hear it in the wind, or when your cat's sitting on your lap and snuggled up to you. There's a space for the Spirit there. One of the things that Fred Rogers said, Mr. Rogers, mm-hmm. He said that the space between the child and the television is a sacred space, mm-hmm. and that is the truth.
Yes.
I don't know if you could hear that helicopter.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I had my outside mic on. I hope I didn't crush it.
No. I barely hear it. I could barely hear it. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
It's gone now.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Okay. And ambient noise is no issue. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers said, the space between the child and the television is a sacred space. And that sacred space can be filled by the presence of the Spirit. And what makes the Spirit perceivable to the audience, to the congregation, is the light inside themselves already. So there's this communication that happens. The light speaks to itself across space and time. It's why it gets captured in Bach's piano. It gets captured in Cézanne's paintings and Wordsworth's poetry. It's for centuries upon centuries, mystical knowers of divine light have been leaving traces of it all over the world for us. And sometimes it's people like Jesus. That whole Gospel of Mark, where he goes through an awakening experience of transformation, where he finally figures out that the best way to teach is to live, is to show, not miracles, not stories, but just to live it in his own body. And that's what mystics most often do, because it's a word that is ancient and rejected. The church has rejected mysticism for the most part, and there are reasons for that. But it never went away because it's half of what we are as human beings. And so it's a constant presence. The light is a constant presence in people's lives, and they get transformed by a direct experience. Maybe can I talk a little bit about that? But
first, tell me why the church has rejected mysticism. I'm curious as to that.
Well, it has a long history. Mystics are notoriously unmanageable. When you no longer abide by doctrine or dogma because you've been in the divine presence where there are no things, and when they were in the place of no thingness, there's no dogma or doctrine. There's only divine. Well, there's love and light. But once you've been in that kind of place, it's really hard to control them. So mystics have been troublemakers for the church. And so that they ended up in monasteries and convents. And for the most part, the Eastern Church and the Western Church, Catholicism and Orthodoxy, tolerated them. They were in monasteries for the most part, and convents, but they were tolerated. But once Protestantism began, it happened just before the age of enlightenment, the age of reason. And once reason began to take hold of the Western mind, and Darwin came along, the church in general became frightened of those mysticism because it wasn't quantifiable. So the church became, both evangelicals and mainline churches became interested in quantification. They wanted to quantify the Bible. They wanted to be able to measure the Bible. They wanted to be able to apply reasoned thinking to the Bible. And they rejected mysticism. But more so, there's another stream that goes along with this. There's this place in the back of the Bible where it says the devil can disguise himself as an angel of light. And mystics come back having seen angels of light. I have. And mystics come back in touch with the dead. And so there are after effects that come with mysticism and near-death experience that the church sees in the Bible as bad, and so rejects anyone who's like that, which drives it underground.
Okay.
And because they used to kill mystics.
Yeah. Well, you can't have one without the other, though. I mean,
you can't have. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I'll say one thing and I'll clarify. I mean, for lack of a better term, Jesus was at that time a modern day mystic.
Oh, totally.
So you can't worship a mystic and then bury him and be a modern, you can't say here's this wonderful Messiah, but he was an okay guy, but he's not really a mystic. He just had some great powers.
Well, they also decided that he was the last one. And then they deified him in the 3rd century, the only begotten Son, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, one in being with the Father, which is all true, okay? Mm-hmm. All of that is completely true, but the same is true for us. We are made of the same light that he was. Mm-hmm. And once they deified him, it made mysticism unattainable for the common person. You can't. We're told to be like Jesus, but then we're told you can't be like Jesus. Instead of what he said, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. The light of the world is in you. And he said the kingdom of heaven is within us, among us, and between us. And make your eye single and your body will be filled with light. He said all these things. And you can't get much more mystical than that. He's telling us to be mystics.
Right. And didn't he also say you can do these things as well?
Yes. And I haven't actually ever picked up, I live in Maine. Mm-hmm. I tried picking up our biggest mountain, Mount Katahdin. I cannot do that. I can't make it lift up and fly and move it to like the coast, which is where I think it should be instead of inland.
Yeah.
But that's, I think people misunderstood it's like the manifestation movement. People want to manifest things in their life, which is totally fine. I mean, but it's about the gifts then and not the giver. Mm-hmm. So if someone is trying to live the secret of one and manifest a Maserati in their life or just a better job or whatever it is that they need, love, or that's totally fine. You're praying for this in your life, but it's a gift thing. Mysticism teaches that you don't go after the gifts, you go to the giver. You go to the presence of the giver, and in the presence of the giver, you become one with that, one in being. Like in John, Jesus says, make them one like you and I are one. That's what he's talking about. Make them like me. Go to the giver and you empty yourself, and then what happens is the light comes to live inside you and then affects everything around you. And you don't really have to do anything except continue a life of surrender to the divine. But it's not like surrender like a slave. It's like surrender like the more you give up yourself, the more you become who you are. It's this weird sort of paradox that I got to tell you, Tim, I was totally resistant. Okay, I came back from the dead, and I was a completely transformed person, but I was pretty pissed off. I was really angry. The last thing I chose to come back. People can read about it in my book or hear about it in a bunch of videos, but I chose to come back, and I said, in this place where there's no tongues and no language and no brains, I said, so metaphor here, I said, I choose to live my life. And the voice, the divine, the ineffable said, you won't live your life, and flicked me back like a little pebble on the fingers, shot me back. And when I came to, dangling on the side of the mountain before sunup, frozen and in a lot of pain, I was pretty upset that my life had changed so radically that I became this new person, and I didn't understand who I was or what I was or where I was going. But one thing that came clear to me the next couple days is that the divine is in every single thing there is. It's just all around us and inside us. And if we just focus on the light itself, everything becomes illuminated. Everything, even your enemies become illuminated. It's like I've had real enemies in my life. I've had dangerous people in my life, and even with those people threatening my life, I can still. It's like I'm the most naive person on the earth. I still see the light inside them. I might fight against them. I might protect myself, but I can't help it. I just can't help it, and Jesus says, love your enemy. And when he says love your enemy, what he means is if you find of the absolute in you, you will love unconditionally everything. and everyone. You might not like them. You might have to fight against them, but you can't help but love them. I know it's crazy. Why do you think? Okay, so you begin with this question about the Bible. So the entire time I was the minister standing in the pulpit, everybody believed that I was a believer. Okay, and I am not a believer, and so we had an embezzler in this church.
Okay,
and this person embezzled large sums of money.
Okay,
six figures amount of money over 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of money. And there was a power block in the church, as often happens. I was going to go into politics. So after divinity school, after college, I was going to go to architecture school, but I was going to go into politics in Massachusetts. I was working in the state house, and I thought, oh, this is a blood sport. Mm-hmm. Politics, it's a blood sport. I'll go into the church where it's safe. Talk about naive. So there was this power block aiming to destroy me personally, professionally, socially, publicly. I mean, it was bad. It was statewide news. Anyway, when it was all said and done, and she had been convicted, and one of the people who was one of my enemies, trying to control this for his own reasons, he's now in prison for embezzlement, had caused me all sorts of trouble for another embezzlement somewhere else. So in the middle of all of this stuff where they were trying to ruin me, I couldn't help but see the light inside every one of them. And one of them was like this, former CIA operative behind enemy lines in Hungary as a secret agent. Another one had been a vice president of a major oil company. These are powerful people. And as much as they tried to ruin me, and as miserable as they made my life, I couldn't help it. And so what happens is that the love is despite ourselves. When the divine presence grows inside you as a living being, it changes a person. It changes the world around that person. And so I was pretty angry when I got sent back, because I wasn't given any tools to understand what had happened to me. You're not going to live your life. And I felt like a curse to me. I was no fucking shit, I'm not going to live my life. Look what happened to me now.
But Peter, so with these two people, what redeeming thing do you find about them to try to love them? I mean,
I don't have to try. I see the living light inside them. I mean, literally, I see a light inside of them. I see the halo around them. I see their aura. I don't see color auras. I see about an inch around every single living being. Every time I look, there it is. A dog, a cat, a human. Everybody's got this radiant form. And when I look at a person, it's like let me put it this way. When I was dead, I had no body. Okay. I wasn't my astral self. I wasn't I was a disembodied, energetic consciousness, like an orb of light. And I could tell you where I was. I was in timelessness, in the eternal now, in fullness and emptiness and nothingness and everything. It's very difficult to talk about.
Well, you know what? Before we get to that, Peter, let's do this. Let's take a break and let's get the entire story of what happened when you made that transition to that near-death experience. When we come back, let's get the full story from Peter Panagore as to what happened when he had his near-death experience. We'll do that when we come back. You're listening to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm Tim Dennis. We have a fascinating show going on here. I don't quite know how to describe this, Peter, but we're tripping the light fantastic, I guess is the best way to put it. We are visiting with Peter Panagore about his near-death experience the first time around when he was on the world-famous Lower Weeping Wall along the Icefields Parkway in Alberta, Canada. And we're about to talk about that first experience when you are about to have your near-death experience. We know you're freezing. We know that you said you were there for 12 hours and you're freezing?
It was longer than that. It was 24 hours, but it was sun up to sun up.
Okay. And man, that has got to be a painful death. Just a cold, painful death.
It was a painful death. And
you were telling us before the break now, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around, because I mean, we all have human emotions. We all have human emotions. We get angry. We do love people, but we get angry. We do have a sense of pettiness at times. But you're telling us that even with people who try to embezzle from you, even from people who try to bury you, I mean, not physically, but bury you metaphorically, that you still see this aura around people, this light aura that reminds you or tells you that, you know what, this is a person that still has this metaphysical light to them, that you can love them. Which I'm still trying to wrap my head around, which I guess I'm not thinking with the right part. I should be thinking with my heart. Yeah. And this light has to do with what you saw on the other side. Now guide me through this, Peter, as you're on the Lower Weeping Wall. Okay, let's back up a little bit. Guide me through the day as you're. Let's start out from the beginning. Take me through the day as you're going ice climbing with your partner. The start of the day. Were you feeling anything that made you trepidatious about going in the first place?
Well, yes. I was trepidatious because I'd never been ice climbing before.
Okay.
I had been rock climbing, I'd been mountain climbing, I'd been backpacking, I'd been winter camping, I'd been snow caving, I've been working on the National Ski Patrol since I was a sophomore in high school. It's a winter camping kid, a winter backpacking person, an outdoors guy. And I'd done quite a bit of climbing. And I've been in the high peaks and lots of other peaks as well. But I'd never actually gone ice climbing. There was a new experience for me. My climbing partner, Tim, was a certified lead climber. And so and plus we had just spent 8 days together snow caving, like backcountry skiing with Nordic skis and backpacks out in the wilderness, like the real deep wilderness. So we totally trusted each other. And we arrived at the Lower Weeping Wall, which is maybe 70 yards off the Icefields Parkway along the Saskatchewan River between Jasper in the north and Banff in the south, if you're familiar at all with Alberta.
Okay. And
there's a valley that runs right up that whole way. And so when we got there, we walked in, the snow was probably, 5 or 10 feet deep, but there was a path because it was a climb. So when we got there was a bunch of climbers on the wall already. We were the last climb team coming in. Maybe there was a dozen people climbing that day. I don't really remember. And I set myself up for failure. And unbeknownst to me, in my young 21-year-old bravado, I couldn't come up with 2 ice axes. I got all the gear that I needed except for 2 ice axes. I had 1 ice axe and a significantly shorter, maybe like an 8-inch long ice hammer that is not really used for climbing, can be used for climbing in an emergency. It's used for chipping ice, chip, before you put the ice screw in, and then you use it as like a lever to screw the ice screw in, and you screw the ice screw out. It's a chipper, basically, and a screw. It's a screwdriver and a chipper, really.
Okay.
But I was going to use it to climb with, and what that meant was that when you set an ice axe, think of something that's perpendicular, and so the ice is the longest line on the perpendicular form, and about a third of the way up the shaft of the line there's a strap that you can put your hand through And once you set that axe, you can let go of the axe and open your hand, and the strap, you just rest. So you can set this thing and you can dangle on it. Don't have to use the muscles of your forearm to hang on. You can just relax. But with a hammer, you can't do that. So I burned out. My muscles burned out. That's what happened. And so by burning out early, I slowed my climb, Tim's climb too, as a result. And ice climbing isn't the kind of thing where like you get tired and you decide, well, I'm just going to go home, honey. I'm going to turn around and go back here. You can't do that. It's not the way it works. And so I had to complete the climb. And by the time we knew we were in trouble before we reached the top of the climb. It was only 500 or 600 feet on a 10,000-foot mountain, but it's still 500 or 600 feet. That's a long way to fall.
Yeah.
But when the sun was setting, the sun began to set, and I was watching the other teams descend as I'm still trying to get to the top.
Ooh.
And so by the time I actually got to the top, Tim was waiting for me. The sun set as I got there, and I watched the last team walk out. And I remember this guy looking up at me and kind of shaking his head and waving his arm, and I could see something about his body language, like, "Geez, I hope you guys are going to be okay." Somehow he and his buddies were like conveying this to me. And I thought, no, we're not. This is bad. And as soon as the sun went down, the temperature dropped about 30 degrees, I guess, because violent shivering set in immediately. So my whole body became like a sewing machine. Every single muscle in my body was pumping up and down like a little sewing machine, independent of each other. So there's like all these pulses all over my body, and including my jaw. My jaw was clattering. So the deal is that it was a day climb, so nobody brought up overnight gear.
Oh.
We brought enough food for the day and water for the day, and we sweat all day.
Yeah.
So no food, no water, and sweaty. So our temperature dropped immediately, and plus I was young and buff, so I had no reserves on me that I have now.
Yep.
So Tim was to my left, I'm to the right. Sun goes down, temperature drops. Tim hauls up the line. It's a double line, so it's like 300 feet long. It's like 300-foot rope, but it's you double it, so it's 150 feet. Mm-hmm. So he pulls up this rope, and it becomes this big, huge knot because he's scared. And we're both scared. We both know what kind of deep trouble that we're in. We are 500 or 600 feet up. We are in an extremely isolated. Yeah, this Icefields Parkway is right there, but there's like 3 cars a day go by. This is the middle of March, and so we're by ourselves, and the sun goes down, and we know we're in trouble, and so we discuss what we're going to do. We're going to die here, is what we decided. We are going to die here because we're 600 feet up, and the sun just went down. And so if we're going to die here, what are we going to do? We talked about snuggling up against the ice face, kind of conserving our heat, but we didn't have any heat. We're already shivering. And so I was on the ski patrol at Bridger Bowl in Bozeman, Montana, and I've been boning up on hypothermia. So I already knew what all the stages were, and there was no way we were going to survive that. So we decided the only way we were going to survive is to fight our way off the mountain. And so that's what we decided to do. I could go into lots of detail or little detail.
Well, I at this point I'm intrigued. We should go into some lots of detail.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
So Tim pulled up the rope. It's dark. Okay, so now the sun has gone down, and I'd never been in a place like this. I live in a rural place now.
Okay.
We don't have very much light pollution where I live, very little light pollution. But up there's no light pollution. So there was no moon in the sky, but there were so many stars of so many colors that it actually provided enough light to see by. To see a little bit by. And I have night vision anyway. So I'm like, given day or night.
Yep.
Daytime I wear dark glasses. Nighttime I can see better than other people. So I'm pretty good at night anyway. So my job was to untangle the rope. I had to take off my gloves, which began the frostbite in my fingers.
Ooh, okay.
And I'll tell you something about freezing, is that freezing feels like fire. If you ever accidentally put your hand on a griddle, that's what it feels like. It feels like you're freaking on fire.
Yeah.
And it's like extraordinarily distracting when you're trying to survive. So I have my gloves off. I untangle this. Frostbite begins to set. Ended up with 2nd degree frostbite, not 3rd. So I didn't lose any digits. Nothing turned black, but I was full of blood blisters.
Oh.
But by the time this was all over, I was kind of a wreck. And so anyway, let me say this. Up until 2016, I could never tell this story without crying. 2016, I went back and I faced my trauma. And since then, it's a lot easier for me to talk about this.
Okay.
So Tim being the lead, the certified climber, we rope up. We take the rope and we rope up to each other because we have to make this traverse on this cliff on the ice with our crampons on in the dark, even though we can kind of see it's still dark, with a mountain to our right and the drop to our left. So we rope up in case one of us falls, the other can maybe save, or we both fall. We don't really know. So we make this traverse over, and we get to the first rappel, and it's a tree sticking out of the mountain. So the tree is maybe it's a 10-inch tree maybe in diameter. And the idea is that you take a piece of nylon webbing, which is flat tubing, and you tie it in a square knot, and then you wrap the flat tubing. Webbing is a popular thing you use when you climb. Okay. So you wrap the webbing around the tree, and then you throw your rope through it so that when you pull your rope down, there's no friction. Okay. And it doesn't freeze to the tree. But part of the thing about frostbite is, hypothermia is that you begin to lose your reason. You begin to make poor choices. The brain begins to freeze. Yeah. The head gets so cold that I don't know, the blood flow slows down or something, or the whole thing just kind of jams up a little bit. So we made our next bad choice. Tim's like, I don't want to lose this webbing. I spent a lot of money on it. I'm like, yeah, fine. No big deal. Let's just throw the rope around the tree. It's like, yeah, let's do that. So we throw the rope around the tree and we descend and we rappel down. Tim goes first. I go second. And most of the way down, we're bouncing off the rock. So we're kind of off the ice and on the rock, kind of bouncing down ice and rock. And then we get to this overhang. So there's this place where we free fall. It's not really falling. You free rappel down, 20 or 30 feet or something. I don't remember exactly. So we get down to this ledge area, and it's this maybe 20, and it's probably 16 by 10, I guess. I'm looking at my studio, it's about this size. So there's this ledge that we're standing on, and the snow's maybe 3 feet deep, and I get down and I unhitch and I pull the rope, and the rope is frozen to the tree, and I can't get it off. And Tim's got his back to me, and he's looking out at this great beauty. And we're now at this point, we begin to lose our coordination. We're like stumbling as I'm like weaving like a drunken person. Oh. And so I'm like not really able to control my body so much. And I pull on the rope, and the thing's jammed, and Tim comes over, and we both put our weight on the rope, and the rope is still stuck to the tree with both of us yanking on it, and we can't get it loose. Oh my God. And so we don't know what to do. Now it's like hypothermia is advancing. We're in the worse position than we were before. So Tim knows this particular hitch. A hitch is like a knot. Hitches use they use tension. So there's this thing called a Prisic hitch, and it's a hitch that you tie around rope that you use that when you push it up a rope, it slides up, but when you pull down on it, it locks in place. So he makes these two. We've got a lot of rope with us. We've got a lot of twine. It's not twine. It's climbing line. It's very thin. It's very thin line, but super strong. So Tim ties one on each side of the rope with these big, huge loops, and we decide he's going back up. Okay. So he's going to climb back up, because there is literally nothing we can do. And Tim feels so responsible because he knows I'm kind of like sliding over the fear. Okay. We were petrified. But we were also super level-headed. That's what we learned about each other. We didn't know each other before this trip. We met. We figured out that we both wanted to do something, and we met a bunch of times. We did a little trip together, but we got to know each other on this trip. And what we learned is neither one of us ever freaks out. We both keep our total level, concentration, because our lives depended on it. Right. So Tim begins to I take the line, the rope, the climbing rope, and I wrap it around my waist, and I lie down in the snow. And I roll myself in the snow a little bit to make the line as taut as possible. And Tim takes these two loops. There's one the length of each foot, and they're at hand level. So he steps into these loops, and I'm holding the rope steady. And he begins to climb back up the rope, like yanking up the rope and putting his foot down and friction. And he has no protection. He's going up 150 feet.
Oh my God.
And so he gets up some distance. I don't know what it was, because my face is in the snow basically. And he says, "Falling." And which means he's falling. Oh. And so I roll out of the way. And as he falls, I don't know exactly what happened, except for that his foot got tangled in the line. And somehow in the loop that he had made, or both his feet I think one foot got tangled in it, and it yanked it free. So he falls. He has all this momentum. He yanks the rope free, and he falls down. I roll out of the way, and he falls in the snow. This is deep, powdery snow, so he's not hurt at all. But the rope comes free, and he's kind of on top of me, and I'm like, "You okay? You okay, man? Yeah." And plus, okay, so here's the other thing: our lips are freezing. Our jaws are freezing. So speaking is this very difficult thing that happens. You can't really move your lips much. And your jaws are kind of locked in place. And so it becomes the whole system is failing. And my eyeballs are freezing in my head. So I feel, it's like, I didn't even know you could feel your eyeballs. And so we get the rope down, and now we're elated. We have the rope. We can make the next rappel. And as we stand up, lights come down the highway, and we're like jumping up and down and waving and jumping up and down. And they pull into the parking lot across the street where our car is, Tim's car, not my car. And it turns around, they flash the lights, and we jump up and down. They flash the lights. They can see us. It's the warden. So we signed into the log that morning. Okay. The wilderness log, we're signing into the log. When you go in, when you come out. He's coming looking for us. I don't know what time it is. 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock. I have no idea.
Right.
So we were like, "Oh my God, somebody knows we're here." So we make this next traverse. We rope up. We make this next traverse. We go to the next rappel, which now is sort of in this corner. There's like this turn, small turn, but the moon had come up. I should say that the moon's come up so that we've got more illumination. Okay. And it's like a 3/4. And so we go onto we're now definitely on rock, and there's an iron pin epoxied into the mountain with an iron ring in it, and that's the rappel spot. So you put the rope through the iron ring, and then Tim rappels down, and it's kind of craggy and rocky, and he gets to the bottom of the rappel, and you got to make this turn around this corner. So he makes this turn around the corner, and I come down the same route. I make the turn around the corner. Now we're on a ledge the size of like twice the size of the counter behind you, so in length and width. Okay. And so we're standing on this ledge, and there's 2 iron pins epoxied in the mountain with rings with carabiners and straps and carabiners, and so we can clip in. So we clip in. Now we're actually, for the first time all night, in a safer situation. When we clip in, we pull the rope down. We don't pull the rope down. We clip in, and we turn to the warden. And we're like, "Hey," and he flashes his lights and he drives off. We're like, "Okay, we're only 150 feet down. We can do this easy." The tent's down there, the car's down there, the food's down there. So I take the line, I take the rope, because Tim is to my left, I'm to the right, and there's a corner. I take the rope and I tie one end of it to my harness, which is what you do when you throw the rope out to the side, and then you pull the line down. And this way, if it's tied to you, you don't drop it. But there's not a lot of slack in the line. So I'm turned around this corner. There's not much slack in the line. I throw the other end out. I pull on the line. And as soon as I pull on the line, it gets stuck around the corner. So the rope is lying. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you can snap a rope. You know how you can snap it and it gets a waveform running down the rope? Yep. But if it's leaning on a table or a boat or an object, the frequency wave goes no further. It stops right there. Right. Yep. So I pull on the line and it's stuck. And if I snap it, when I get I get like one wave in it. I can't shake it loose. And so now I can't go back up because the rope is loose. If I'm over there and I have to put my weight on the line, and the line gives way, then I fall. So I have to stay where I am, and I start pulling on the line. I can't get the darn thing loose. The second pull, it gets tighter. Third pull, it gets tighter. And now it's like totally set. It's like I can't move this thing at all. And now we're back in this desperate situation. And now our hypothermia had become so advanced that my feet are frozen like blocks of ice. I got to this place where I couldn't feel my feet anymore.
Oh no.
So the fire stopped and in my feet and my earlobes and my nose and my cheek and my chins and my fingers. And so we discussed this. We had talked about how we should not talk much, because every time we spoke, we used up our energy reserve, and we needed that to survive. So we've totally minimalized our talking. And we spoke again at this point. The rope is stuck. I can't get it loose. We discussed him trying to help me, but he would have to unclip to get over to me to help. But if he unclipped to get over to me to help, we're both drunken sailors up here. No offense to sailors, I'm a sailor. But we're swaying like we're on a ship's deck, and so we have no stability. Our coordination's gone, our thinking's gone, but we had enough reason to understand that I had to do this on my own, and I couldn't. So I then had this peace. This peace started coming over me. And as it began to come over me, I had all of my blood. I felt like all of my blood rushed from my extremities, from my legs and my arms into my heart, my lungs and my brain. I felt like there was this rush, and I got hot in my chest. And that's a classic sign of hypothermia. And so I unzipped my coat, even though I know it was stupid to do that, because I was trained, but I didn't care, because now I feel like I'm sweating and I'm hot, which accelerates hypothermia. But I remember thinking, I don't really need my hands. I need my heart. I don't need my legs. I need my lungs. I can lose those parts. That's okay. And Tim, don't unzip your coat. I'm like, I'm unzipping my coat. And this peace kind of settled in on me. And the peace was a recognition that I was going to die there. And so I remember looking out at the beautiful mountain across the way over there, across the Saskatchewan River, and thinking about my family, and thinking about my spirituality, thinking about God, thinking about my life. And I began to fall asleep. And so I'd fall asleep, and my body I would black out. When I fell asleep, it was like somebody shut out the lights in my brain. Brain goes off. I collapse. I smack the rock with my body because I collapsed to the rock. I got a helmet on. I wake back up. I stand back up. I yank on the rope, and I do this 4 or 5, I don't know how many times. I stand back up, and this time, my peripheral vision turns black, like a big circle. Mm-hmm. And this big black circle begins to collapse like a tunnel in reverse. The darkness is creating a tunnel vision. And as it closes on me, I remember looking around, trying to figure out what was going on. I didn't understand this. And it went black. And instead of my brain going black, like it had been when I was falling asleep, my brain wasn't asleep. I was in darkness, but I was aware. I'm aware in this darkness, and I am aware that I'm not in pain. I'm not in pain. I don't know what's going on. I'm kind of confused. And as I'm aware of this darkness, I remember thinking, the mountain should be in front of me. Why is the mountain not in front of me? Why can't I see the mountain? But what I could see was this deep, deep darkness. So I don't know how to describe this. I have yet to figure out how to describe this. The distance of the darkness was the size of the galaxy, but there were no stars in it. It was just darkness that had depth to it. And the depth came from the instant when way far, far in the distance, like a tiny pinprick of light appeared. And that tiny pinprick of light rushed at me faster than the speed of light and filled this darkness as it came at me. So it both illuminated the darkness, and I could still see the darkness, and it remained like a compact unit, but its brilliance was immeasurable to me, and it communicated to me telepathically. It spoke to me without language. I'm taking you. Inside of me, I heard this, and I put up all sorts of resistance against it because I didn't know what was going on, and all of my resistance was like Bruce Lee punching a piece of paper. Right through the paper, grabbed my soul, my consciousness, and took me right out of my body. Whew. And now I'm encased in this thing. And this entity, this angel, this being of light was intelligence itself. It was compassion and beauty and safety. Now I'm inside of this ball of light, and I am being carried back the way it came. And I can see myself I'm like outside of the ball of light, looking at my astral body inside the ball of light, this entity, and I'm inside the ball of light. I have two perspectives, and I am completely at ease. I'm like a rag doll in a river. I have no more agency. I can't make any of my decisions come to action. But this entity is communicating itself to me. It's communicating comfort and well-being to me. And so I'm carried into this. I'm carried back to where it came from, and I get to like its place of origin, and I pop out into this infinite fullness that is also emptiness. It's nothingness and fullness. I can see in every direction at once. I am no longer a body at all. I have no form. I have no matter. I'm not even energy. I am consciousness itself. But I'm so much bigger. I am ginormous compared to my physical body. And I see that my seeing, I can see, is my thinking, is myself. There's no separation between these things. And my identity is what I see even. And so, but I can see outside of myself. I'm still an individualized consciousness in an ocean, in a galaxy-sized emptiness that is also strangely illuminated, because I can see that infinity lies beyond my sight. But I can see further than I'd ever seen before, in every direction at once. It wasn't like I could only see in one direction. I could see all around me all at once. And like I was one big eyeball. And then a portal opened, like a doorway, like a waterfall. It was gigantic, and it was this flow of, I call it like pearlescence on a Cadillac. You get that pearlescent shine. It's like pearlescence. It's all these colors. It's this reflection. It's this light, and it's flowing like a river, and it's translucent and transparent and solid at the same time. So I see the surface of it. I see the depth of it. I see through it, and through it is a deeper tunnel leading deeper in. And I am compelled by this. This is the most beautiful light I'd ever seen. And it's not just light. I was reading in Revelation this week, in chapter 22, the crystal river. It's like the crystal river. It's like this shiny, all I want to do is touch it. So I reach to it with myself. And when I touch it, it fills me. It flows into me. And all these things happen at once. It flows into me, and I know myself. I hear my soul name, the name that I was called into being by. I'm shown the origin of my soul life. I see the length of the life of my soul. I see all these other lives I had lived, and all of those other lives were nothing compared to the size of the soul of myself. And I am nothing compared to the size of the light of the divine. I am one tiny little photon from a bazillion trillion photons, so much bigger than me. But I am the same substance, but I am also told, you are creature. I made you. I am creator. And I go through then somehow I shrink. I hear my name called. I hear myself being called, but I shrink back down to suffer all of the pain that I gave away in my entire life from inside the persons that I gave it to. So I am sort of inside a place of suffering where I, as I had been as Peter, experience all of the pain that I gave away in like a chronological order, but it all happens at once, of all of the people that I intentionally and unintentionally hurt in my life. Only I'm not just me suffering the pain I gave away. I'm inside of every one of them, feeling their direct experience of it.
Whoa.
And so the divine, I know now that the divine was witnessing and experiencing my entire life. The communication to me was, there is nothing hidden. I was naked and in pain. And so I'm suffering all of the pain I gave away. I'm feeling all the pain that I gave to people. And I am judging myself in comparison to the divine love that's flowing into me simultaneously. I made you. I know you. I love you. I've always loved you. I forgive you because I made the universe and you are just a creature. You have to live the life of the universe that I gave, that I created, and I love you. I have always known you. I am mercy. I am love. I am beauty. I am welcome to me. Come to me. Love me. And as I listened to this, as I heard this, as I was in this suffering, judging myself guilty, I saw the nature of humanity being unavoidably broken, in that we always cause suffering to each other unavoidably. And so but it's not our fault that this is the way that the universe is designed. And all the love that I had given away in my life, and all the love that had been given to me, was like this golden ear that through which I could hear the divine voice as I'm in the midst of this suffering. The divine voice is speaking love to me without language. And as I hear it, my heart turns toward it, and all of the suffering ends. And I am infilled with beauty, purity, love, bliss, adoration, awe, healing, wholeness, understanding, wisdom, knowledge. I am expanded. I expand and expand and expand as the divine flows into me, being of my being, light of my light, becoming this other thing. And I felt like if one more drop of unity had entered into me, then I would have obliterated back into the light itself. And I wanted to know, and in the middle of all of this, I wanted to know how everything worked. I wanted to understand all of the universe, everything, the quarks, which I didn't know at the time, quarks. I understood all of it in an instant. So I'm going to stop there for a second and say, do you have it? Because I got more.
I do. The reason why I let you go there, Peter, is because I wanted to get into the moment with you and experience it the way you experienced it. Now, I do have questions. You said in there that when it came to harming people and for lack of a better term, trespassing against people, inflicting pain upon people, that you were feeling what they were feeling. there was a lack of punishment put there.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, no, because I know, because you're feeling what they were feeling, but in dogma, we're told that we're always thrown the hellfire and brimstone. We're always thrown you're going to suffer for an eternity. It didn't sound like you suffered for an eternity, but it did sound like you suffered. Like
True.
You had that moment of judgment where you were thrown back everything that you dished out.
Yes. I recognized in comparison the pain that I caused versus the love and goodness that I was being shown.
So that was your moment of review. That
my life review. I call it my purgative fire of divine love. So it's a purgation. The fire itself. I should add here, Tim, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, there. Go ahead.
I should add here that the suffering that I experienced that I gave them was my karma, and that it was 10,000 times more suffering than I had ever imagined that I had given them. And it turned out that every hurt that I gave away, I actually gave to myself.
Okay. Because, see, I think in our world, I'm going to try to put this in the right text. I think we think that, if somebody, I'm going to use a biblical term here, if somebody trespasses against us, or we have the feeling that they've come against us in a way that we feel unseemly, that we feel like we can come back at them twice as hard, okay, or twice as bad, that they've really got it coming. So we dish it out twice as bad. Are you telling me that in that moment that we go through this life review, we're not only going to feel that, but we'll feel it twice as bad?
That's what happened to me. More than twice as bad. 10 times as bad. 10,000 times worse. But so I'm going to skip to the end a little bit here and say that after I came back, because of that hell that I went through, which I didn't know eternity from not eternity, I just knew that I was suffering the pains that I gave away. It's changed the way I live. I live a very different life as a result. I know I hurt people. I know I have hurt people in my life. And that's just what it is to be a human being. But I live my life trying to do as little harm as I possibly can while still trying to be myself.
Now, you mentioned it's part of nature to inflict pain, that almost like it's part of a balance. So
yeah, well, the venom of the rattlesnake isn't poisonous to itself, but it's got to eat. So it uses its venom to kill its victim, which is a suffering way to die. But it's got to eat. So it eats, but then somebody eats the rattlesnake. It's this, everybody eats something. Everything eats something else, it seems here, including black holes eating down star systems. Everything consumes something else, so it seems.
So it's almost like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Peter, but it's almost like, we commit these acts. I don't want to call them evil because they're not necessarily evil, but bad acts against people. But it's almost like it's not forgivable because you're going to pay for them. It's almost like, well, you gotta rob from Peter to pay Paul. You're going to end up paying for it, but it's in your nature anyways. It's going to happen. Which is why
you're forgiven. And so the problem is that the pain that I gave away creates this attachment. So in A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, you get Jacob Marley, and Jacob shows up at Scrooge's house on that night, and these are the chains I forged in life, link by link. And they weigh him down into himself. The problem is that the pain we cause to others becomes attachment to ourselves. And so in order to be in flooded by abundant love, we have to give up our chains. But most people clearly, they love who they are. Not everybody loves themselves, but we love enough about ourselves, especially if you're happy that you hurt that other person, if they deserved it. Then it sort of sets inside yourself, set inside of myself anyway. And it was, I had to be released from myself in order to be infilled with light. And I'm expecting to go back through that again, Tim. Not every near-death experiencer gets that hell like I did. Was it because I was Catholic? I don't really know. Near-death experiencers seem to get the near-death experience that they need in life, the one that teaches them to live differently. Did I need that particular thing? I guess I did. I expect to go back through it again. I can't wait.
Really?
Because, I prayed for almost 30 until 2015, from 1980 to 2015, every day I prayed for my death. Every single, I had a secret prayer life. My secret prayer life was twofold. I practiced my interior practice, which I told nobody about. Nobody knew what I was doing. My meditation, Peter's meditating again. Peter's doing yoga again. They had no idea what I was doing on my interior world because I wouldn't tell them. Nobody asked. I didn't tell. So I had this carving my way back to God path going on inside of me, but also this sort of, hey, God, today'd be a good day to die. Hey, God, take me home today. Today, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have come back. I really want. I know. I said I did, but no, I don't. Take me home today. So I prayed for my death every single day, which means I'm willing to go back through the fire again at any time, because I know that it's not lasting. I know that it's in the same way that spiritual growth on earth paradoxically comes out of suffering. That's where it comes from for lots of people. It doesn't have to come from suffering, because some suffering doesn't produce it, but that's not the suffering's problem. That's your problem. That's the problem of not using the suffering toward the crack where the light gets in, as Rumi puts it. But a lot of people have a lot of spiritual growth. Look at AA. Just look, just that, as an example. So, I'll just finish up the thought is, in order to be infilled with the oneness of light of being, I had to give up my own suffering. I had to be released from that. I had to suffer in order to see, to hear, it seemed like.
I wonder, and you brought up an interesting point, that point being, you had to suffer the things that you felt were, I guess, for lack of a better term, sins on your part, and you had to pay for those sins and had to go through that pain or that suffering in order to cleanse yourself. I wonder, for someone who's a career criminal, like let's say a mobster who their regular job is to make hits and doesn't feel a thing, if they go through that same suffering.
I don't know, but what I do know is that the same question is asked of Pol Pot and Adolf Hitler. Is Hitler in heaven? I think that anyone who turns to the light, here's the thing, Tim. I wasn't forgiven before I died. I was forgiven after I died. And that's a very different thing.
That is interesting. Yeah.
And I was forgiven not because I deserved it, because I didn't. I was forgiven because I was loved, because I am made of love. Abundant love is what God is. That's what God is. It's love. And this love is so selfless and so compassionate that it lets us be ourselves even after death. God did not force me to turn around. All God did was flood me with light and let the light let me choose. And so could a person who, a mobster whose job it is to whack people, to put it in vernacular, a killer, or any of the people who've ever gone to war, who, there's this still small voice inside of human beings that says, "Thou shalt not kill."
Mm-hmm.
We hear that, and yet sometimes we do. And so how is that forgivable? It's forgivable because God is totally made of love and light. And if we just turn, even after death, toward the light that forgives us and is offered to us, the forgiveness came before I turned. I just had to turn into it. It was like the $10 bills lying behind me on the sidewalk. It's already there. I just have to turn around and pick it up. But I have to choose that. But the choice was the presence of the divine was so self-evidently the most powerful thing of all there is. I felt like even though I had a choice, it was irresistible light. And part of the reason why it was irresistible is because people loved me in my life. I could recognize love. And love isn't this emotion. Love is not emotion in God. Love is all there is. It is light and beauty and joy and truth and knowledge and creator and omniscience and omnipresence and all the words, the giver, the bestower, the lover, all these things, charitable, the compassionate one, the merciful one. All these things are contained inside of love. And so, and I love to point to Corinthians 13, and the greatest of these is love. Another translation for that very same word is charity. Love is this multiplicity of things in this world, but in the divine presence, the multiplicity of all the goodness in the world is one thing, and that one thing is directed towards welcoming us home because we are it. It's not like God is over there and I'm over here. I am made of that substance. This substance is simply calling me back to itself. It's so, which sets me outside of most of Christianity. So that was one of the things that I hid most of my life. Although I was always about the universal salvation because I can't help but see that this is true. It's just the love loves itself. Love loves to love itself. It just does. Which it swings around to the very beginning of our conversation. It's not that I have an emotional attachment to my enemies. I don't. Yeah. I might not like them. I might even fight against it. I fought against these people. I mean, I beat these people. I won. We got this person convicted, and we got these people who were protecting her. They walked out. They never came back. They not only left the church, they left the yacht club and the YMCA board, the yacht club board, the YMCA board, the library, everything in town where they were asserting their dark deeds. They weren't evil people, but they were doing bad shit. And we won. They lost. Not that I was trying to make that happen. Right. I was just trying to save the church. Right. And myself at the same time, because they were really trying to ruin me. Right. And so, but all of it stems from this other part. So we got a couple more minutes. I've got
absolutely. So, I just want to add one thing, and the words that you just said when you were breaking down everything there, especially with the thoughts of love and being forgiven before you even had, before you had even asked for it. I think that there are a lot of soldiers out there that struggle with PTSD, that are struggling with the things that they have seen in war. And I think those words that you had spoke, I think would hit home with a lot of those soldiers.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I was going to, there was this guy in the church, and he was a lieutenant in World War II in the Navy. And he was at every terrible battle, every single terrible battle of all those islands on the approach to Japan, Saipan, and all these terrible, terrible battles. Oh, he just passed away last year at 93 years old. But 25 years ago, he befriended me. And he came to understand what I just said to you is true.
Mm-hmm.
He died a peaceful man. He died a peaceful man because he came to understand that he was beloved for who he is, and nothing about him has ever been not known. And that his core of the essence of his being is actually light. And he came to not only believe that, he came to understand it through the love of his wife. She became this vehicle of love for him so that what I was saying for him became an actuality for him. And he found a way to forgive himself. And that is and what he found when he died, I'm sure of it, was what I found when I died, is that forgiveness is just waiting for you there. You just have to accept it. Mm-hmm. And that God understands what humanity is. War is not this new thing. We've been fighting against each other for hundreds of thousands of years, tribally, long before written history. Well, this is who we are. We are both physical and spiritual. We have to live in the world. If I had the circumstance where I was under threat, and it's a real threat, and the police and the sheriff's department and social services and all these large groups, state groups, and lots of people, they're all involved. And my life was threatened. And the sheriff told me, the deputy said, Peter, you're going to have to get guns in the house, and you're going to have to get security lighting, and you're going to have to get a dog to protect yourself from this threat. And I said, hey, man, really? He said, not for you, but for your family. You have to do this for them. I'm like, holy shit. So I did. Mm-hmm. And eventually, this person I befriended, he did 11 years in prison for a terrible thing. And he lives not 300 yards from me. I took him under my wing.
Wow.
And now he's got some mental illness. I'm like the person where I live that he comes to when he's in trouble. But in the meanwhile, until we developed that relationship, I was prepared to protect my family. It's not a contradictory thing to love someone and want to protect them. Because love in earth is not this thing as it is in heaven. Love here is messy. We hurt the ones we love. The saying, it's true. And we hurt other people who want to love us, and we can't love them. We do a lot of hurt in the world, and God knows all of this. And if you're a veteran and you're suffering, God bless you. But if you're suffering, understand and know that any ounce of love, the feather's weight of love, outweighs a mountain of lead of suffering. Love is so precious. And on your departure, keep your heart aimed at the divine. Practice aiming your heart at love now. It makes the whole passage so much easier. That's, I guess, all I want to say about that.
That's very good advice, Peter. So lead me through how this near-death experience ended for you, because obviously now you've met the divine. You've gone through your life review. You've touched this crystal river. You've been given, and I'm curious as to know what this name was that was given to you. Did it translate to anything human that you could?
No, unspeakable. In the same way that the YHWH in Genesis, the Hovier Vovier, the Tetragrammaton, the Yahweh, the word that the people made into Yahweh, which is not actually, it doesn't actually have vowels.
Okay.
In the same way that's unpronounceable, that which calls me the name of my soul is unspeakable by myself. I can't even tell you what the name of the guy. It sounds inside of me, sounding inside of me like a bell all the time, like a flow all the time. It's the very presence itself. And if I could tell you what it is, I would, but I can't.
When you were shown these different lives that you had lived, were any of them remarkable? Were they lives that you could say, "Oh, I was Napoleon, I was this, I was that"?
I don't even know that they were human.
Okay.
And there were many of them, but they were all so insignificant in comparison to the light that my soul is. They were like, I described them like, I've got a butcher block table. So the butcher block table, it's the maple wood. That's what it is. So it's maple wood. It's an inch thick, and my little lives were like the little lines in between where the wood gets at the table. It's the wood that's the table. That's my soul is myself. My lines, they were like, and so I was allowed to look inside a couple of lives. And I was like shown inside them, and I'm not even sure they were on Earth. I was unfamiliar with what I saw, and they also seemed to be simultaneous because I was in timelessness, and so part of my whole life, I'm not really interested in my other lives. I'm more interested in my soul.
Now, you've had a second near-death experience, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Just briefly, what happened in this second near-death experience, or what happened to cause this?
Family genetics, heart attack.
Really?
Killed my grandfather, killed my sister, would have killed my dad, but he got life flighted and did kill me, but I came back. And so genetics. So I had run 5K, 3 miles the day before, and I'd been having some heart palpitations. I didn't know what they were. Turned out it was a clog, and I was a vegetarian for 20 years. I ate well, I was fit, and all this kind of stuff. So I was in a yoga class, and I had a heart attack, and I died. And I could tell you the whole story, but I died in the ambulance on the way to the catheterization lab. By the time I got into the ambulance, an hour had passed, and I'd already been which meant I was outside the golden hours of predicted survivability. Okay. And if I survived, I was going to have damage. And then I had an hour and a half ride to the catheterization lab. And on my way to the catheterization lab, and I'm not on any morphine because I can't take morphine because it makes me sick. So I'm using my meditation because I've been meditating for 40 years. And part of meditation is that if you look at your pain, your physical pain, you can rise above your physical pain. It's a biological thing. It works for everybody. So I've been practicing that a long time. So I use my meditation to keep my heart pain, which feels like an elephant on my chest, at bay. And I'm in the ambulance, and I hear the paramedic say, "We're losing him." And I open my eyes and I look at her, and she's got fear on her face. She drops into her game face as soon as she sees my eyes are open. But as soon as I open my eyes, my heart is like raging in pain. So I go back inside myself to like get back to my meditation. But when I go back inside myself, I'm not in my body anymore. I'm not in the ambulance. I'm sort of in a dark space above my body, inside a darker space. And so I'm above my body. And the angel, the same angel, comes down. I've got my soul back, I guess you could call it, my soul back to the angel. And I hear it calling me, come home, welcome. We've been waiting for you. Here, it's your time, it's your time. It's like all this joy. So I turn around, and this being of light, not aggressively this time, I might add, is very welcomingly, it's your time, come on. So I turn and I start to go, because I've been telling my wife, I've been planning for 40 years. The first chance I get to leave here, I'm out. I'm gone. Back home I go. And so I start to go. I kind of connect with the angel, and I start to go. And then I think, oh, I know what's going on. I should think about this. I've got time. So I turn around, I disengage from the angel. I turn around, I go back inside my body, and I sort of look around, but I'm not physically in my body like I feel any pain. I'm sort of like poking my head inside a dark space. So I poke my head inside this dark space, and I'm looking around, and I can see my family, and I can see my son. So when I was in the urgent care center, where I finally got to before I got in the ambulance, my son was there, And he came up to me and he leaned into me and he squeezed my hand and he looked me close in the eye, and I could see fear in his face. And he said, "Dad, I love you." And I could see this happen. And I'm like, he's not ready for me to go yet. I can see what his life will be without me. And then I see my daughter. She's older than him rather, and she had just literally left an abusive marriage with a baby. Mm-hmm. And she needed me, and the baby needed me, whose birthday is today. She turned 7. And so and I could see my granddaughter's life without me. I was like, see these two parallel tracks of her life. And I was like, oh, she needs me. Who's going to be the dad in her life? It's me. So I turned back to the angel. The angel had politely receded and came rushing back down again. And I basically said, I'm staying. See you next time. Turned around and went back in. Wow. And I should tell your listeners that I chose to come back the first time too. I chose to come back for my parents. It's a longer tale to tell, but twice now I've got to come back for the sake of love. And the first time I regretted it. I was like, pray for my death all the time. My dad just passed away, and it's a good thing I was here. But this time, I'm sticking around for as long as I can to be there for my granddaughter. So the longer, I'm not praying for my death anymore.
Yeah. Did it take you some time to realize that this life was really a gift to you, more so than you thought originally when you first had that NDE?
2015, when I died, is when it finally turned for me. I mean, it was always a gift. I was always working for God. I was always trying to bring light into the world. I hid my near-death experience till 2015 publicly. I came out locally earlier than that. But it wasn't until I died again and realized that I needed to stick around for my granddaughter that I settled in pretty well. Near-death experience is a difficult reintegration. And nowadays that it's such a public thing, a lot of people who are having NDEs or have had them more recently are getting support for reintegration. I didn't have any support. My support was my spirituality, my interior prayer life. That's how I did it, and it gave me great gains. But it wasn't until my granddaughter came along that I can stay here for a while. It's okay.
What makes it so difficult, Peter? Why is it so difficult to come back here?
Oh, because this place is illusion. This is like every day of my life. I live outside of my body, looking into it. I'm always non-attached. I see suffering. I feel people's pain. I feel the pain of the world. I feel the crudeness of this place. This place is so crude. I have to eat things to feed my body. When I was dead, I was energy. I didn't feed it. I thought, and it was. I thought, I want to understand all cosmology, and I did. And I didn't have to think about it. I just understood it. There's so much effort and work here. It's so blind. It's blind. And so I had to hide. I hid my near-death experience because nobody who walks around seeing light in every single thing that there is. Who makes choices, social and political and personal and economic choices that are considered eccentric? Because I choose people over, I choose health, I choose well-being, I risk my life for the sake of others. I've just done that my whole life. It makes it difficult to socially become very isolated. When I feel people's radiance. I feel their energy. How do you talk about that in public? But mostly it's this constant hearing of the divine presence inside of me that never lets me forget where I'm from and who I am. I am not a human being. I am a soul living in a body. And I live in heaven and I rent here. And it's like I'm always a renter in my own body. It's perspective. I had a radical perspective shift that has only gotten worse, or better, depending on your point of view. Because and my point of view is now, it's hard as it is being here. I decided a long time ago to have as much fun as I possibly could while I'm here and have as good a time as I could. And so that's been a helpful thing. But I didn't really integrate to the level that I am now till I died again.
Wow.
And I should say that I came back with a new identity again. Everybody who dies, you come back with a new identity. You'll get the same body and the same DNA and the same. If you have mental illness, you still got mental illness. You got a broken leg, you still got a broken leg. You got the same body, but you have a different identity in that body.
How have you changed from the last time you had an NDE from the second time you had an NDE? How has your personality changed?
Oh, kind of. Well, I accepted my fate, I guess you could say. That's a big change. I'm no longer Mr. Dark and Gloomy. I know it's hard to think that I ever was, but my physical body I get depression. I've got a DNA thing. I get some depression, and when you're homeless, when you know that you're not from here, it makes it very difficult. When you always feel homesickness, it just makes it more difficult. And so after my second near-death experience, I wasn't so homesick anymore. I got a little visit, and the little visit was enough to make me say, "Oh, it's all right. I'll stick around here for 30 more years or so." And it's all right. I feel like I'm my Uncle Arthur, who had this really high-pitched voice. Well, it's okay. It's all right. No, it's okay, Peter. You'll be fine. That's kind of how it is for me. So, and I guess the biggest change is this. I'm in the hospital. My book is coming out, this Audible bestseller. Mm-hmm. It's coming out. I'm going to be on Fox and Friends in 9 weeks in New York. And I come back wounded. I've got scarring in my heart. So I come back physically different. But my TV show that I'd run for 15 years, I get word I'm in the frickin' hospital, and the producer, the vice president, calls me, who's a really nice guy, corporate high up the ladder kind of thing. We're moving your show back from 6:15 to 5:15 in the morning, and what that meant was that my audience was going to be cut in half, and that meant that the income for the nonprofit was going to end because it was always a percentage, which meant I was going to be out of a job.
Ooh, yeah,
and so after that ended, which was after the show ran for 91 years, I was the fifth guy. So it was a great relationship. I love this. I love these people. Mm-hmm. But I was out of a job, and I realized I had no longer had the constraints of the church. I'd been out of the church for 15 years. I'd been working in television and radio. Mm-hmm. And so I had a very different perspective. We had a business and nonprofit and all this kind of stuff. I'd learned so much. And I decided that the whole time I was in the pulpit, I hid my near-death experience until the very end. I played around with it on television. I kind of gave people hints of it. And then the book came out, and I realized I'm all in. This book's coming out. My life is going to change. I'm going to really start actually talking about it. I'm actually, instead of letting just the message speak for itself through my life, I'm going to start Not Church. I started Not Church on YouTube. I started doing this counseling. I started being very open about it. So I guess I spent my whole life getting ready for what I'm doing now, is what it feels like.
Most definitely. Now, you did mention those counseling sessions. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with those.
So people have mystical experiences, mystically transformative experiences, spiritually transformative experiences. An example of which is most common is visitation from the dead. Somebody is grieving because their spouse or their child died, and then that spouse or child comes back and visits them and telepathically communicates with a download of data of love and well-being and healing, and then that person now knows that death is not the end. They know that their beloved is still alive, and their grief literally shifts. So they go through a transformative experience. People who go through mystical experiences, that's one type, have a transformative experience, and it gives them a new identity. I help them understand what happened to them, and I give them validation, but mostly I help them negotiate living in the real world, because it's a very different world that you live in after one of these kinds of experiences. So I have clientele from all over the world, everything from visitation from the dead or the flow of the river of life through their third chakra. Kind of suddenly my chakra opened up and I feel like I got a flow of living life right through me. I don't know what to do. And when I talk to people about it, they think I'm crazy. But not to me. I live in that space. So I counsel people who have unusual spiritual experiences. That's my niche. I do other kinds of counseling too, but that's really my niche.
All right. And also, if you want to get a hold of Peter, you can go to his website, peterpanagore.love, Love. Is that how they get a hold of you for these counseling sessions?
You betcha.
Okay. And we'll have a link to that website in the description of this show. So you can also look in the description of the show if you don't remember that address. But one more time, Peter Panagore, Panagore.love, Love. And you can sign up for those sessions if you need to get a hold of Peter and get some help with that. So we... absolutely get a hold of Peter for that. We have quite a few people in our audience who do experience those issues, and they could definitely use your help there, Peter. So
glad to help.
Absolutely. Peter, this has been fascinating. I tell you, I could probably go on for another hour or two, but we may have to visit again sometime and talk about some of these issues. I know that we haven't even talked about chakras or anything like that. I know that's UFOs, yeah, right? And what exactly is entangled in that? I think maybe we'll save that for another day, and we'll visit again sometime on that. I tell you, Peter, this has been fascinating. We haven't even really tackled the whole thing about whether and how your view on traditional Christianity has been changed, other than just that you've had this touch with the other side and that you really haven't said much about how that's changed. Do you have just a quick note about how it's changed?
Yeah, I came back as a non-believer, and not in religion, not just but not in any cultural thing either. Anything that human beings have thought up, I know that it's all thought up. So I worked inside the church for a long time. I think the church helps a lot of people. I think the church has done a lot of harm. I think that the essence of the message of Jesus has been grossly misunderstood, and that the message is love, and that you are the light of the world. And if you make your eyes single, your body will be filled with light. That heaven is a reality, that where he is, we will be, all those things. And so, but none of those are doctrinaire. I am not a doctrinaire person. I'm widely read globally in or other mystical traditions. Primarily, I focused in the West, but I am a mystic that speaks mysticism with a Christian accent. That's sort of how I see myself. And I chose Christianity afterwards because it was my cultural context. It made sense. I took a class, ended up back at my university, and I took a class in comparative religion department, comparative literature department. And the study was East and West, mysticism, East and West. So I was exposed to Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism and Confucianism, all these things. And I spoke with the professor, went on a retreat to a monastery where, well, it's a long story, but anyway. Mm-hmm. So I spoke to the professor, And the advice he gave me is if your friend, because I lied to him, I said, I had this friend who had this experience. If God is what your friend wants, then stay within the tradition of your culture, because then you won't have to learn another culture and you'll be able to advance that much faster. So I stayed in Christianity sort of as an anthropologist might go live in a village somewhere and eventually go native. I've gone native, but not really.
One last question here, Peter, and that is, when you had your NDE, your first one, not the second one. You described the second one as having that angel come down and talk to you. But when you had the first one and the presence that you saw, you felt that overwhelming feeling of love, do you believe that was the face of God that you saw and felt?
The face that was shown to me, but not the totality of infinity, just the brevity of the capacity of my own consciousness capable of being infused by it to a limited degree. The infinity, I would need to obliterate to enter into the fullness of the divine. But yeah, you could call it the face of God. But there was no physicality to it at all.
At what point do you believe you truly get to see the face of God? Is it when you totally commit to the idea that you're going to leave your body behind and join the afterlife?
God has no face. That's metaphor. There's no face. I'm
just saying it metaphorically. I'm not saying physically.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. When you, so I think that I've had other mystical experiences with the same angel, and I've come to understand that there are more layers of selflessness that don't involve being a human being, that involve stripping off layers of soul to become more and more of the divine. And I think that you can see I saw the face of God. I think that the ever deeper that you go into the divine infinity, you see more and more of the face. More of the face becomes clear. It's like a focal lens that becomes finer and finer and finer in tuning. And so when I look at a human being's face, and I see the light inside their eyes, I see the aura around their heads, I see sometimes the light on their forehead, I'm looking at the face of God as a human being. And when when I was in the unitive state of being, I was in the face of God. And when I had this other experience, like a Kundalini awakening sort of thing that happened afterwards, where I became so illuminated. I was at a car wreck scene, helping save somebody's life, and I had this illumination inside of myself where there was no part of me left. I became other. So I think only God sees the face of God and its fullness. And since I'm part of God, if ever I became the identity, so much of me falls away from my soul that my soul returns in fullness to the divine, then I'll too be the face of God. But I guess I'm going far down that route right now. That's what I really want, though, Tim.
Yeah. Understandable. And no, that's a good answer. That's exactly what I was looking for. Peter, I want to thank you so much for a very intriguing program, and wow, a lot of answers that are intriguing. I think even people who are afraid of that transition. I think a lot of people who have doubt, have fear, have trepidation, will be intrigued by this program. That they, will maybe be a little less afraid after hearing this program.
I'll end with a tiny little story, and that's with a man who I helped cross over. He was kind of a pirate kind of person, and I held him in my arms as he died. He was in the hospital, and he was really afraid for how he had lived his life. And I kept whispering in his ear, Go to the light, turn to the light, aim for the light, aim for the light. And as he died, he did. And you could see it on his face. His face went from fear to peace before he died. And this is the same thing I say to everybody. If you're afraid, aim for the light now. Practice aiming for the light today. Meditation of silence is a very easy way to do that, but so is loving your neighbor, loving the people around you, being kind. Aim for the light in everyday life. And when you die, you'll know what it looks like before you get there.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate you very much. Again, peterpanagore.love, PANAGORE.love is the website. You can get a hold of Peter for counseling sessions there, and also you can check out his website and learn more about Peter there, peterpanagore.love. I want to thank everybody for a great week here on Darkness Radio. Again, remember to love one another and take care of one another this week, and have a great weekend. We will see you again on Tuesday for True Crime Tuesday, and another great week of the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio.